The latest generation of Wi-Fi is promising faster bandwidth and more capacity for many businesses. But with even newer technology coming next year, does it make sense to upgrade now or just wait a bit? We're going to talk about the pros and cons of Wi-Fi 6E versus 7 on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. I'm Keith Shaw. Welcome to Today in Tech. Joining me in studio, Brandon Butler, a research manager from IDC. He covers the networking space. Welcome back to the show. You've been on the show before.
Yeah, great to be here, Keith.
Even in the olden days, you and I did that pie challenge.
We did.
I lost. I got a pie in the face, but we don't hold grudges here on Tech Talk.
No.
So you cover you've graduated beyond sort of the network world, and now you're at IDC, and you get to wear nice clothes and all that kind of stuff. So you do cover the Wi-Fi space as part of your role at IDC, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me about kind of the current state of Wi-Fi, the market. What is the current de facto standard? Because I know there's a lot of different technologies. The Wi-Fi Alliance changed the numbers, and so where are most businesses in terms of what version of Wi-Fi that they're using?
Sure. Yeah. So when you talk about Wi-Fi, there's like Wi-Fi 4, which is a sort of legacy standard. Wi-Fi 5 came out a couple years ago. Wi-Fi 6 is sort of the de facto standard that we have within the market today, mostly on the business side. Maybe the sort of consumer side is a little bit further behind, but Wi-Fi 6 is sort of what most organizations are using and buying today. But we have this big, huge generational enhancement to Wi-Fi with what's called Wi-Fi 6E. And that really opens up Wi-Fi into the 6 gigahertz band. So traditionally, Wi-Fi has been in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band.
Yeah.
So all the previous generations of Wi-Fi were in 2.4 and 5. Wi-Fi 6E opens up Wi-Fi into the 6 gigahertz band. So this is a really big enhancement for Wi-Fi and the future of Wi-Fi. And it's going to open up a whole new range of potential use cases for Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah, the confusing part for me, at least initially, was Wi-Fi 6 is not in the 6 gigahertz space.
Correct.
Wi-Fi 6 is still 5 gigahertz frequency. 6E then adds 6 gigahertz. So
correct.
6E now has 6 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and the traditional 2.4.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's my first issue of confusion. The next one is, so what are the big differences between Wi-Fi 6, which would be 5 gigahertz, and then Wi-Fi 6E? What are some of the major differences?
Yeah, so again,
this is your report, so you can reference that if you need to.
Yeah, so again, Wi-Fi 6E opens up this new spectrum that hasn't been available for Wi-Fi in the past. In the past, it was 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. Now we have the 6 gigahertz spectrum. And it's not just that there's new spectrum, there's a lot of new spectrum available. So we have a lot of new channels. There's like a 3x capacity in terms of the amount of bandwidth that's available for Wi-Fi. And so you have more channels, you have wider channels that can transmit more data, concurrently. So there's just a lot of new potential for this 6 gigahertz, in the Wi-Fi band. But of course, this is a slow technology outroll.
Yeah.
And so there are still, we're just starting to see some of the Wi-Fi 6E, which is the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi. We're just starting to see some of the access points and infrastructure available for the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi. We're still just starting to see client devices. Like we haven't seen the iPhone come out with support for the 6 gigahertz yet. A bunch of Android devices do support it now. So it's going to be over the next year or so, we're going to start to see a lot more folks standardizing on Wi-Fi 6E, particularly on the business side. Again, consumers are a little bit further behind in terms of how they adopt Wi-Fi. But yeah, this new 6 gigahertz band opens up a whole range of new use cases for Wi-Fi.
Obviously it's bandwidth and capacity, and those are the big, you just see speeds that are, because of the higher bandwidth and the number of channels, you can start seeing faster response rates between the device and the client.
Yep.
And so what types of applications will this enable for a lot of the companies out there? Because you hear, more speed just means I'm just going to be more awesome at everything. But when you're talking about it from a business perspective, what sort of applications are you saying? Because there is a trade-off.
Yep.
As well as you go up into that 6 gigahertz space, the range of that becomes a little bit more limited, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of use cases for the 6 gigahertz band, it can be used for any sort of Wi-Fi connectivity that's available now. Again, the client devices aren't quite supporting all of the, not all client devices are supporting 6 gigahertz at this point. But for really high bandwidth applications that are really sort of data hungry and need a lot of bandwidth, think about things like AR and VR. Think about real time, streaming analytics of devices that are connected to the Wi-Fi. Those are some of the use cases that we hear about for 6 gigahertz. Also, very crowded Wi-Fi spaces. 6 gigahertz could be an opportunity there because, again, you have more channels and wider channels. So if you think about like a channel being like a roadway, you're going from like a 2-lane highway to a 6-lane highway.
Yeah.
And so you can just have more bandwidth and data on that 6 gigahertz band. Initially, some of the use cases are also going to be ideal for Wi-Fi it's not going to interfere with other bands, right? So if you have devices that can't support the 6 gigahertz band, they're not going to be interfering with the devices that are on the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz. So we're thinking about some IoT use cases or devices that would benefit from having this sort of clean spectrum, at least as some of the initial use cases. And then, a couple years from now, when we do have client devices that are supporting 6 gigahertz, then this is just going to be extra bandwidth and space for Wi-Fi.
Is there still interference that happens at the 5 gig space?
Definitely.
I always knew that there was in the 2.4 because everything from your refrigerator to Bluetooth to microwave ovens, I think was a big deal in the 2.4 space. I didn't realize that there was interference that could happen in the 5 gig space.
But each advancement of Wi-Fi is making that interference, less of an issue.
Yeah.
And so there's better capabilities for Wi-Fi now to be able to, communicate with multiple devices at a single time or have more bandwidth across those channels that the Wi-Fi is using.
And again, I think that the high density capacity, like the high density spaces, you're talking about stadiums.
Like airports. Like public venues, even smart cities, things like that, where you have a lot of people connecting to the Wi-Fi at the same time. The wider channels and the more bandwidth is going to allow Wi-Fi to be able to support some of those use cases.
Yeah, anecdotally, do you experience that too when you go out and about and you're like, wow, the Wi-Fi really stinks here? And is it because it's not because of the technology? It's because of how many people are trying to access it at the same time.
And within stadiums and public venues, you're going to have a mix of cellular and Wi-Fi together. So, there are DAS systems and there are cellular networks that provide connectivity into those spaces as well. But, not one of these technologies is, the ubiquitous answer, right? We need to be able to support both. And Wi-Fi 6E is a big enhancement to be able to enable Wi-Fi to do some of these use cases.
And another use case would be in sort of high density residential areas, apartment buildings, things like that. So you could take advantage of that if you were a property owner, for example, and needed to provide better Wi-Fi for your tenants, right?
Yeah, and part of this is just sort of the next and latest generation and standard increase for Wi-Fi. So, every 2 or 3 years, we see a new Wi-Fi standard come up. And so 6E is part of that sort of regular cadence of new Wi-Fi standards that comes up. But again, it's opening up this really, expansive new capacity for Wi-Fi within the 6 gigahertz band. So it's more than just a regular sort of upgrade. It's really a generational, enhancement for Wi-Fi.
Okay, now, so the big question is that Wi-Fi 7 is also set to come out next year,
pretty fast
2024, right? Yeah. So as a company, do you look at it and go, well, only next year, early equipment will come out next year. So maybe I don't want to invest in an upgrade now. If I'm currently on Wi-Fi 6 or even an earlier version, the point of this report was, hey, don't wait. So sort of give us the argument for why 6E might make sense for some companies right now rather than waiting.
Well, and if you have a need for a Wi-Fi upgrade, if you're on Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 5 had two AC Wave 1 and Wave 2. If you're on AC Wave 1, that's a fairly legacy Wi-Fi technology now. And so there's an upgrade cycle that's sort of due for your company. And so if you're looking to upgrade your Wi-Fi now, 6 gigahertz and the 6E spectrum that we've been talking about is available in 6E now. So there's no reason to necessarily wait for, a future standard. So if you have a use case for needing new Wi-Fi within your organization today, I don't see any reason not to deploy Wi-Fi 6E. But you're right, we're already starting to see some Wi-Fi 7 access points and infrastructure available on the market. But this is fairly early days in
Yeah.
terms of the Wi-Fi 7. Like the standard isn't quite finalized. So we expect by next year, the standard will be finalized. And then, we'll go through this whole other,
It's like a
stream
non-going
of,
cycle. Yeah.
of, Wi-Fi 7 will start to come to market.
Does 7 stay in that 6 gigahertz space,
does,
or does
yep.
it doesn't add another
No,
frequency?
it doesn't.
Okay.
No, yep.
Yeah, because that would be a problem then too, or just
Well, and
tracking all the
that's one of the
frequencies.
benefits of Wi-Fi is it's backwards compatible, right?
Yeah.
So 6E is going to, support the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and 7 is going to support 2.4, 5, and 6 going forward. So, if you when you do get to Wi-Fi 7, it's still going to support the 6 gigahertz as well. So,
Yeah. I got a little story for you. This is I go off on tangents every now and then.
Okay.
So I do have a router that supports 2.4 and 5.
Yeah.
And the most annoying thing that happens is I've got my PlayStation 5 set up in one room and my router's in another room.
Yeah.
And I try to get it to go on the 5 gigahertz network. And I think it's just that it's far enough away from it where the system goes every now and then they're like, I'm going to switch from the 5 back to the 2.4. And I have to tell it, no,
Yeah.
bad PS5.
Right.
No, go back to my other network. Because the question I had in my head was, I wonder if there's still a lot of legacy devices that are still using that 2.4. And I don't want to go back to the naming days, but 802.11b, that was your
Right.
initial
Yep.
2.4.
Yep. And G
Is
and
that
N and
Wi-Fi
all these-
1 now or Wi-Fi 2, whatever when they renamed the numbers?
I mean, on the client side, there's a lot of legacy Wi-Fi out there, and so there are going to be a lot of devices that are still running some of these supporting legacy Wi-Fi standards. But again, Wi-Fi is backwards compatible. So if you're deploying 6E or even 7 in the future, it's going to still support Wi-Fi connectivity for this range of
In
devices.
a business setting, what would some of that legacy equipment still be?
Yeah, so
would it be more IoT related things or just
Yeah, I mean, you can think of devices, printers, and just a range of business devices that would be in a business environment. But you also think about not just in business environments, but think about retail, think about hospitality, healthcare. These are some of the major industries where we see Wi-Fi being deployed.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of devices that would support legacy standards. But again, Wi-Fi 6E is this sort of clean spectrum within 6 gigahertz. So if you have newer devices that you don't want to have interfere with some of these legacy devices on the network, then 6 gigahertz is an opportunity for clean spectrum, within the
And we were talking about Wi-Fi 7. So are there additional features that comes, that brings to the table that could get people excited?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways I think about Wi-Fi 7 is, 6E introduces the 6 gigahertz spectrum, and Wi-Fi 7 is going to make that 6 gigahertz spectrum even more efficient. And so Wi-Fi 7 brings a number of enhancements around optimizing that connectivity, for devices, being able to talk to multiple devices at a time as a Wi-Fi access point, communicating with devices. So it's sort of going to make the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi better, which is going to enable, even faster throughput and speeds as well. So, every new generation of Wi-Fi is a little bit faster, better throughput, being able to communicate with multiple devices at a time. And Wi-Fi 7 is going to continue that trend.
Yeah. One of the things, so I used to write for Network World as well and would cover it from the consumer space. And there would be all these new features for whatever new generation was coming up. And the big one was either MIMO. Is it MIMO or MIMO?
Yeah, MIMO.
One of those, multiple in, multiple out. And then beamforming. And that was the coolest thing. And so I have a router and it supports beamforming, but that's about as far as I get. I'm like, do I really want to try beamforming? And I'm setting up my antennas and I'm trying to point it in the direction where I think, my kids and my wife and me might be. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to point them out and hope for the best. I'm pretty sure I'm not deploying beamforming correctly. Do a lot of people in companies, do they understand those technologies and take advantage of it? Or is it just like, it's nice to have, or if there's a specific situation where I need it, then it's great that it's there.
Well, on the business side, I would say the more innovation that we see is on the software management platforms for managing Wi-Fi. So there's pretty advanced management platforms for being able to control what your Wi-Fi environment looks like, what bands clients are actually connecting to, who are the users and devices that are on your Wi-Fi network, even using Wi-Fi for things like location services. So being able to do indoor, mapping or wayfinding or asset tracking, things like that. There are a whole range of use cases of sort of adjacent technologies that Wi-Fi can enable. And we've also seen a lot of enhancements for Wi-Fi management systems around some of the ML and AI capabilities. So as ML and AI get integrated into these Wi-Fi management platforms, you're laughing, but it's true.
No, I'm laughing because I was hoping to get it through an episode without talking about AI or machine learning.
I'm an analyst. I got to talk about ML and AI.
All right.
But these Wi-Fi management platforms can understand, what devices are on your Wi-Fi network. They can tell you, oh, this device is having a problem before that device is actually realizing it's having a problem. And then it can, actually fix some of those problems. So I think ML and AI, actually has a real opportunity to be able to help, organizations manage their Wi-Fi better.
That's all we're going to talk about right now.
Sorry.
You can bring it up later, but
okay.
All right. I'm going to have you put your analyst hat on a little bit. I noticed in your report, you track sales of equipment and all sorts of, you make these predictions about, and they're usually going up to the right. But I noticed that there was not any sort of COVID related dip in the number of sales and equipment.
Yeah, in fact, the opposite.
Yeah. Why did that happen? Why did we not see a dip? And why is it now going up and to the right?
Yeah, so the short answer is supply chain constraints. And so when COVID started, there was this huge supply chain constraints for component shortages. And we saw this not just in the Wi-Fi industry, but across the consumer industry as well. Chips were tough to get, and the pandemic just interrupted supply chains across the world. And so a lot of organizations were looking to upgrade their Wi-Fi equipment as part of a sort of regular refresh process, and they weren't able to do that because the inventory wasn't there to be able to deploy it.
But then wouldn't you have seen a dip at that point? No?
So there were still steady sort of investments in legacy Wi-Fi that was available. So we saw a lot of Wi-Fi 5, for example, being shipped out. And so these huge product orders got built up for a lot of the Wi-Fi vendors. And now as the supply chain is eased and there are actually components available and the inventory is ready to ship out, we've seen these Wi-Fi vendors basically draw down their backlog of, Wi-Fi that was ordered, a year or two ago. Yeah. They're finally able to ship it out. So we've seen really strong growth rates in the Wi-Fi industry. I think last year was like 30%, the year before that 20%. Normally Wi-Fi is like a 5-6% annual growth year over year. So we expect that to settle down a little bit over the coming years, get back to the sort of mid-single digit growth rates for business Wi-Fi moving forward. But then you have things like, 6E that sort of inject new sort of life into Wi-Fi and a whole bunch of new use cases. Then Wi-Fi 7 will come next year. So, it's sort of a cyclical market where every couple of years you have a new standard that sort of helps to drive new investments.
Do you also have to track the trends of the return to work and hybrid work environment? Because you mentioned a lot of companies, they were due for an upgrade, and then COVID hits, everyone goes to their remote offices. As a company, do they say, oh, I don't know if I want to invest in this. If we're going to invest and upgrade our Wi-Fi, but there's no one here to use it.
Sure, no, absolutely.
It's almost like that old, if a tree falls in the middle of the woods, if we upgrade our Wi-Fi and no one's there to see it or use it, have we made a great investment?
Right. Well, I mean, one of the ways I think
track
about
that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that we've heard is that there may be fewer people coming into offices, but when people are in offices, they're going to, every meeting is going to be an online meeting now.
Yeah, great example.
And so you're going to have Zoom and Teams meetings. These are bandwidth heavy and intensive applications. So you may have a lower density of users connecting to the Wi-Fi, but there may be higher bandwidth applications that Wi-Fi has to support. And I would also note that sort of carpeted office is one important segment of the Wi-Fi market, but there's a whole bunch of...
What does that mean?
Just office spaces in general, right?
Okay.
But there's a whole number of other industries from, we talked about retail and hospitality and healthcare, even public venues and government, smart cities, things like that. These are also very important, industries for the Wi-Fi market that are, continuing to upgrade their Wi-Fi as well.
And even in those spaces, then you run into that whole Wi-Fi versus 5G kind of argument. We might have you back to talk about that. I don't want to get too much into 5G at this point. But yeah, so
the quick answer is both important. Both technologies are important,
but they don't necessarily compete with each other, or do companies have to make a choice?
No, it's not. It's not a choice, but there are sort of pros and cons for each. Wi-Fi is really good for indoor communication. Cellular really good for outdoor. Cellular is good for sort of long range mobility. Wi-Fi is good for sort of shorter range mobility. If you have sort of devices that need to move around quickly, maybe Wi-Fi is not a great solution for that. But yeah, we're seeing a number of advancements in cellular as well for private cellular networks that don't use the public cellular network, but actually a private cellular network that's built for a specific organization.
All right, save that for the next episode.
We'll talk about that next time.
I don't want you to use all of your bullets. So getting back to the COVID and the remote work, did you see either with hard data or maybe it's just anecdotally, companies that wanted to invest in Wi-Fi to support remote workers? Because it initially probably when everybody was going and working at home, they're just using their personal network, correct?
Yep.
Did you see any sort of movement from companies that said, oh, we want to improve your Wi-Fi, or was that only maybe at the executive level and you didn't see it at the rank and file?
No, absolutely. We did see that in the early days of the pandemic. It was what we called the branch of one, right? Because businesses have these branch offices they support, and now those branch offices are single employees that they have to support. And so Wi-Fi is part of that, but it's just sort of one part of it. So, some employees are leveraging their sort of broadband, ISP that they get from, whoever they get their internet from. But from a IT perspective, there are other things taken into account as well. Not just do you have Wi-Fi, but sort of what is your security posture, as a remote worker as well. If you used to come into an office every day and you have a firewall, between where you are sitting in an office and your cloud-based applications, well, that firewall isn't going to work very well if you have, working remotely. So we've seen this huge rise in cloud-based security tools that sort of act as a broker between, remote workers connecting to cloud-based applications, and you have a cloud-based security system that can sort of regulate that traffic. And so users don't have to, route their traffic back to the office before it's going to a cloud-based application. So yeah, we've seen a number of advancements in how organizations are thinking about supporting remote workers. And, that continues today because it's not going away, right?
Would the enterprise vendors be involved in deploying equipment to
absolutely.
A remote office, or would they just sort of farm it out and saying, oh, just use this off the shelf system, but it's still a good system and then we'll just set it up remotely, or we'll have you set it up?
In the early days of the pandemic, we saw different use cases for businesses sending actual equipment out to some employees, like you had mentioned, executives.
Yeah.
Also,
or the people with secure data. Again, a guy like me, I don't have any secrets on my laptop.
Yeah, if you're just using,
if you're the sales, lead, or if you're the CEO that has all that
or
secrets,
think of like
or HR
contact center workers, who need to have high quality connectivity. We've even seen things where there are these devices that support SD-WAN, as it's called, which allow you to be able to bridge multiple connections. So it's not just your internet broadband but you can also leverage cellular connectivity. So if you have some hiccups in the broadband connection, you can sort of backhaul to the cellular connection to sort of enable that uptime. So yeah, we've seen certainly executives. You've seen some sort of telehealth, doctors who are doing remote patient visits. You don't want those to go down. Financial traders, there are some sort of knowledge workers, as we call them, need some sort of in between capabilities. Maybe some Wi-Fi is good enough. But I think really at the end of the day here, security is the bigger thing than maybe connectivity.
It reminds me of a story and I don't want to name drop who it was, but there was an editor at Network World.
Okay.
And one of his kids used his computer and went to Minecraft or some other gaming site and then got a virus.
Oh, geez.
So I kept thinking about that during the pandemic, because then when he came back in the office, that virus then went all over the place.
Not good.
And I was thinking that there was going to be so much of that if my kids, for example, are using my network.
Yep.
I would rather have a separate Wi-Fi network almost to sort of eliminate that that possibility.
Yeah, and one of the things we hear about a lot today is sort of zero trust network access. So this idea of, you're not just allowing any device to connect onto your network. We have sort of whitelist policies in terms of these are the devices that I know that are okay to use, these corporate applications. And that can be applied even for remote workers as well.
Okay. We've been talking about this in the context of the U.S.
Yep.
Is the rest of the
For
world
60 gigahertz, yep.
Yeah, is the rest of the world on the same pace for adopting SE?
Yeah,
Are they
so-
ahead of us?
Yeah, so there's definitely differences across the globe in terms of the availability of 6 gigahertz for Wi-Fi. So the U.S. is more advanced than most parts of the world. There's in South America, there's good support for Wi-Fi for 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi as well. In the European Union, we've seen sort of a smaller amount of spectrum within the 6 gigahertz band be available for Wi-Fi. Organizations like the Wi-Fi Alliance and others are certainly advocating for more spectrum to be opened up
Yeah.
for Wi-Fi.
But then you get into regulations and rules and governments and things
there
like
are
that.
some incumbent users
Yeah.
of Wi-Fi, specifically for outdoor use cases, some military and government use cases for Wi-Fi. For the 6 gigahertz band, it's not used for sort of everyday communication, but it's sort of it's available for them to use it, and they're an incumbent user. And so some other regions of the world, particularly in Asia, haven't opened up that 6 gigahertz band yet. But the expectation is that 6 gigahertz will be open across the globe in the years to come.
Okay. But in the 5 gigahertz space, it's pretty much
Yeah, this is
a standard.
Yeah, not
so
as
if I,
not
if
as
I
much
go
of an
over to
issue.
London, I'll be able to use a 5 gigahertz
Yep.
Wi-Fi and not
Absolutely.
have to worry about not connecting or
Yep.
anything like that.
Yeah, I mean that's a long-standing
Yeah.
unlicensed spectrum that's available
Yeah.
for Wi-Fi.
And so why wasn't 6E allowed? Again, outdoor use is expected this year.
Yep.
Of 6E.
yeah, so again,
And
there
why
are these.
wasn't it? It was just because
There are
the
some
other
users, some incumbent users, as they're called. So it's particularly in government and some military operations that sort of have a right to use the 6 gigahertz. They've been using it for a long time. So there are actually these things called AFCs, automatic frequency coordination, that are basically these software management systems that allow the Wi-Fi to check to make sure that there's no other use of that 6 gigahertz band before the Wi-Fi actually, sends its beam out. And so these AFC systems can actually work very quickly. And so we're seeing a number of AFC systems come out to be able to support 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi for outdoor use cases. And we expect by the end of this year into next year, we're going to see a lot more support for outdoor Wi-Fi 6 gigahertz use cases. And yeah, I expect this is just something that's going to need a little bit more maturity for the Wi-Fi market to become widely available.
Is that more for campus environments where you're connecting wirelessly between buildings?
Yeah, I mean, that's one, smart cities and outdoors, again, public venues that want to be able to extend Wi-Fi capabilities outside, some residential use cases as well. Again, Wi-Fi is sort of okay for outdoor use cases in sort of defined areas. As you get into wider connectivity, that's where something like cellular would make more sense for folks.
Do you track a lot of the movement that goes on in the IEEE space where they're developing the future standards?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Are we going to keep getting more and more frequencies, different frequencies, higher frequencies? Is that going to slow down at some point? And now you're just talking about individual little features that are being developed?
6 gigahertz has been the big new sort of bandwidth that's been enabled for Wi-Fi.
Because I would also imagine that if you go higher in bandwidth, you're going to have like almost microcell adoption, and you're not going to have a lot of range for the speeds that you need or want.
Yeah, so I mean, this new generation of 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi is a big deal for the Wi-Fi industry because they've been talking about it for a really long time.
Okay.
And so it took a long time to get to the 6 gigahertz. So I don't expect a significant new sort of amount of spectrum to be enabled for Wi-Fi. But again, 6 gigahertz opens up a lot of new spectrum for Wi-Fi. And so, I think this will really sort of set Wi-Fi up for a next generation of use cases.
Do you get more excited about the technical details of the technology or the applications?
I like the business, sort of what businesses are doing with it. That's because at the end of the day, that's what
we sort of have to
understand.
Yeah, we sort of have to understand the technical parts of it.
Absolutely.
But it's more about what can you do with this, and what problems can you solve, and maybe this will finally enable flying cars. I don't want any flying cars on Wi-Fi, but you get the idea of like, wow, I can really do a lot more than what I've been doing before.
Absolutely.
So that's what excites you about Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
All right, Brandon, thank you very much. I didn't bring a pie, otherwise I was going to
next time.
Yeah. We'll have you back. We're going to talk about 5G at some point. So,
sounds good.
So thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks.
That's all the time we have for today's show. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any comments you have below, and join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.